All right, folks. Good evening. Professor Finn here, everyone's favorite funeral service educator and homeless mall Santa. Welcoming you to the first day of spring and welcoming you back after a long hiatus. Um, in all honesty, I haven't been well. I wanted to take some time to kind of focus on myself, focus on work-life balance, stuff like that. Second part of that is I anticipated purchasing a new computer to replace the now aging iMac. And they just came out with a brand new Mac Studio, so of course I'm eyeing one of those. But they start at $2,000 and go their way up, and I got to be honest, as big as I am, I just can't afford to give up that much plasma to buy a computer. So we're going to wait for that to hit the refurb market. So, got a fun little show today for you. Got some articles I want to talk about from our friends over at the Funeral Director Daily. I'll tell you what, if you're not already subscribed to the Funeral Director Daily, Tom Anderson runs that. Shout out to Tom. He does such a great job publishing articles, both factual and opinion pieces. And I'm going to look at a bunch of those today, dating back, probably a couple of months. Some really stuff. And because I can, we're going to have a little bit of a flame war on something that triggered me this morning as I was going on Facebook looking at stuff, and I'm just like, did you now? Time to incur the wrath of, little itty-bitty influencer Professor Finn. So I grabbed my keyboard, I put on my bulletproof vest, and we're going to play Keyboard Warrior just a little bit later. But let's go ahead and get into a couple of these articles, and let's hope that everything is set up and working good. There we go. Chat is up, so if anyone wants to drop something in chat, say hi. Let me know where you're from, whether it's now during the live stream or whether it's later. We're going to talk a little bit later about an upcoming giveaway that I'm going to have. We'll talk a little bit about that after we get through an article or two. So I saw this on the Funeral Director Daily. Get the thing. There it is. This is back from February and says, teaching soft skills now a necessity. And absolutely. So it's pretty well documented that mortuary or embalmer education began in the late 19th century with the advent of the practice of embalming. That is correct. We really didn't get formalized instruction on the funeral director side of things. Yeah, cabinet makers took apprentices and stuff like that, but it really wasn't until about the Civil War and the sanitation movement in Europe that we started really seeing those two things come together, and that led to training programs. So absolutely spot on. History of American Funeral Directing, available at www.nfda.org. It is one of their publications. Not that I'm shilling their book or anything. Most of that early education for the profession was no more than courses in the practices of embalming. Very true. Almost a century later, when I went to mortuary school to receive my degree and prepare for national examinations in order to be licensed, there was still a heavy concentration on embalming because, again, sanitation and science is what made us who we are. Which by then included learning of organic chemistry as well as the science of embalming. However, by the time the 1980s, instruction included a lot of information about the psychology of grief, as well and a little bit of business law and business operations. My, how the times have changed. However, there was nothing really taught about the soft skills of the profession. And remember, soft skills is not something men are typically good at, right? The soft skills is typically something that the women are good at, and throughout history we've seen where the mothers and the daughters care for the dead and dying, and then kind of the men take over for the funeral ceremony. But that's one of the reasons why women are excelling in this profession, because they typically are innately tuned to those soft skills. I would argue that those soft skills are a major part, not only now but back then, in satisfying clientele with the services that you have provided. Those soft skills, such as communications and marketing, also play a major factor in customer acquisition, leading to profitable funeral homes, and I'm of the opinion that today they should be a major part of any business curriculum, including mortuary science. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Anderson, because let's talk about that real quick. So why can I talk about that? What makes me qualified to talk about it, other than the really cool hat I found here in Texas last year? The fact that I've sat on the curriculum committee for 5 years, I've taught for a decade, and surprise, 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 we teach communication in mortuary school now, right? It's not just speech communication, right, where you have a speech class. We're bringing you into the psychology of grief and counseling. We talk about how to be an effective communicator, and that focuses directly on these soft skills, and that is something that has been in the curriculum since I was in mortuary school back in the mid to late 90s. So, from Minnesota, the student newspaper, my alma mater, the University of Minnesota. Shout out to Dr. Michael Lou Brandt, the head of that program, University of Minnesota. Great program there, great guy, love him to death. He's a buddy. The article deals with the process whereby the mortuary science department teams with the engineering department to make use of the school's virtual reality simulators. Must be nice to have like a research university, right? Doing so, the article states that VR lab allows students studying mortuary science to experience old age and dying. Here's what the University of Minnesota's mortuary science instructor Janet McGee says about the experience. It helps students see the full end-of-life experience. In that sense, it empowers us to be more empathetic and present morticians when we have a greater understanding of what our client families may have experienced leading up to making funeral arrangements. It also helps us anticipate needs more effectively. McGee continues, the purpose is for students to experience embodied learning to see what it might be like from the client family perspective. It's another way to help students build empathetic listening skills. Another great way to do that is go as a student or as a practitioner, go to a grief facilitation group. Listen to what people are saying and how the facilitators approach and question and allow people to explore their emotions. Finally, McGee summarizes the learned experience with the statement, soft skills, including communication, are key to the student's future success. Funeral director Daily Take. As a former owner who employed several morticians, I understand why good prep room skills are necessary. However, I also saw the personal side of the business that interacts with the family clientele, and I never underestimated the power of skills such as empathy, communication, common sense, and collaboration brought to the positive side of our operations. I also noted that it was the exceptional funeral director who could harness the skills of preparation, consumer interaction, business ideals, and self-reliance. It was those funeral directors that could master those skills that I wanted working for me. Not just Mr. Anderson. Good funeral director managers and owners today are looking for those skills as well. And for the record, I found some great funeral directors, both genders, that had those skills, and they were a big difference in making our funeral home the exceptional and profitable funeral home in our area. So that concludes the article, but the moral of the story here is communication has always been part of the curriculum, at least for the last 20 plus years. So why don't we talk about it more? Why is it not emphasized more? Well, pretty much because it's easier to ask questions about science, especially on like the sciences board exam versus the arts. And on the arts side, again, there's only so many ways you can ask about what is the best way to approach people from an empathetic standpoint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that it's there should tell you that it's important. Now, the good news, Zennials, Millennials, et cetera, you are bred to be in touch with your emotions. You have grown up in an environment where you are looking at the whole self. So you are more attuned to that. Surprisingly enough, you have a great deal of problems generally because you are used to communicating with our little friend here, the smart device, and it's texting, etc. So even though you are in tune with the emotions, and even though you want to express yourself, when it comes to communicating, you're at a natural disadvantage because how many of you is like, hey, before you call me, text me because I'd rather just deal with it in text. Well, when you're on the other side of the device versus speaking to someone face to face, that's a completely different thing. It's also completely a different experience. If you are experiencing something in VR, right, it's a good way to simulate it, but it's another thing entirely to sit down and watch a person that is dying, be in an environment of grief, to talk to people who are going through the process. VR can take you a long way. However, it's always going to be that face-to-face interaction that makes us who we are as exceptional funeral professionals. Which is why, folks, whether you're going to a private school, a single-purpose mortuary school, or you're going to a multi-purpose school of learning, you really want to pay attention to your speech classes. You really want to dedicate yourself to making sure that you are an effective communicator, being able to talk to a spectrum of people. Okay? That means good vocabulary, good diction, good language, so that you can approach any client when they come into your office. Speaking to someone in the 1% versus the lower 98% can be very different depending on who you're talking to. And being able to jump back and forth in those communication styles, Very, very important for a funeral service professional. So, again, great job on that article. Very, very important. And funeral home owners, you're going to have to help develop this on the fly because, again, people are tied to their devices. So, my opinion, mailed cremation remains are a problem waiting to happen. February 25th. What do we got? Early this month, the United States Postal Service has issued a notice that relayed effective March 1st, 2025, customers will be required to use United States Postal Service Priority Mail Express cremated remains boxes for all cremated remains shipments. This includes remains shipped as jewelry, blown glass, or other artisan works of art. In other words, if there's someone in it, you need to ship it in a cremated remains box. There is no doubt that cremation as a choice of disposition continues to grow. This is reflected in the number of crematories that are in the United States. From the statistics that I was able to gather, it appears the United States had 425 working crematories in 1975, 1468 in 1999, and 3,374 in 2021. However, with the number of death care establishments totaling somewhere between 16,000 and 19,000, that would mean that not every establishment has their own crematory, and that's true. There are states that limit if you can have a crematory as part of your funeral home. It's who can own the crematory. There's lots of reasons there. There's still many trade crematories operating for those funeral homes to provide cremation services, but not on their premises. Remember, folks, you heard it here. You heard it in other places as well. Cremation is just a form of disposition. It does not dictate whether or not you can have funerals or this or that. It's simply that is how you dispose of the body. So you can have a full spectrum of funeral services along with the disposition of the body, whether it is going to be green burial, cremation, hydrolysis, composting, you name it. Shout out to Tiff. Hi, Tiff. You waved at me. I'm waving back. I operated a funeral home without a crematory for about 25 years until our funeral home built a new facility and included a crematory in the design. Very important thing there. If you are looking at a new build, if you are looking at building a funeral home, you not only want to plan for one retort unit, you want to plan for two. You want to have room to expand. As your business grows, the space is there, and that is something you should talk with your architects and your designers about. Hey, here are the units I'm thinking of. Let's go ahead and figure out what the space I have available, how I can make this work with maybe one, going to two, etc. Because adding later on, very expensive. You can plan ahead of time, much better for you. Prior to that, we drove our cremations about 60 miles to the nearest crematory where the deceased was cremated, and the cremated remains were sent back to our funeral home via delivery service or post-service. Yeah, there are different ways to do that, courier, etc. As the chief executive and owner of the funeral home, a constant worry that I always had was that the cremated remains would get lost in the transit back to the funeral home. And it almost happened once. And in that case, it happened to be a death that occurred in Florida, and a trade service did the cremation for us and let us know they had delivered the remains to the Postal Service to be shipped to our funeral home. The trade service provided receipts and a tracking number. So back in the day, history lesson from Grandpa Finn here, you didn't just ship Priority Mail Express. You're allowed to ship registered mail. There are tremendous differences between Priority Mail Express and registered mail. With Priority Mail Express, they track that thing like they're hand carrying it. With registered mail, it basically got put into a container, the container got sealed, in some case it got locked, and then they would only scan the bag whenever the bag made it from point A to point B. So if a bag got lost in a facility, well, the bag's there somewhere, and that's all there is to it. At least with Priority Mail Express, I'm hoping that those type of instances have gone down because it has a much higher level of visibility. To make a long story short, after about 2 weeks of apprehension and anxiety, the remains were found on a shelf in the post office between the Florida post office and the final destination, registered mail. There was never an explanation of why the remains journey was stopped at this particular post office, and needless to say, we were happy to get moving again and arrived at our funeral home before the expected services. This happened to me. This caused a funeral to not happen because it got shipped from Florida to New York, it got into New Jersey, and it literally sat in New Jersey for like 4 days. For no reason. It just sat there. The scan registered mail, it got scanned going in the facility, and then someone just left it somewhere where it was not seen again. And that was back in the day of registered mail, and that was the best way to. I don't want to say it's the best way. That was the common way to ship it because it was far cheaper than shipping next day express. That experience made me very wary of the idea of sending human cremated remains through a delivery service, including the postal service. While I'm not an attorney, cannot tell you the legal ramifications. I can tell you the damage a non-delivery of cremated remains could do to your brand if a family did not receive the remains. I am not an attorney. I'm not licensed to practice law. I'm not here to give you legal opinion. But from an academic standpoint, if the family can hand carry it with them and bring it themselves, they absolutely should do this. Those little black temporary containers that people are using as urns, they're not urns, they're temporary containers. They are intended to be shipping containers. Why? Because you can put the plastic through the x-ray machine at the airport, and TSA doesn't have a problem with that. Now, if you have a cardboard, wood, or other plastic composite, that can go through the x-ray machine as well. But if you have metal, you have the glue and the resin, the name escapes me right now, the cultured marble, anything like that, can't get it through the x-ray machine. You're going to have a problem. So this is why we use temporary containers, and it is perfectly acceptable to give it to them in a temporary container to travel via air, and then when they get to the funeral home destination, the funeral home can transfer it back to the main urn. My suggestion is that if you are a cremation provider without an on-site crematory, you need to be personally picking up these remains at your provider and hand delivering them to your funeral home and or the families you serve. And that is a very good practice. No ifs, ands, or buts. That is a very good practice, I feel. Let's say our funeral home still brought these deceased people to a trade crematory 60 miles away. I would be putting an extra $75 charge on cremation to cover the cost of a driver at $20 per hour, plus our gas expense to drive to the crematory and pick these remains up in person. And obviously, you might not be doing this every single day, 5 business days a week. You may set it up where you do it Monday, you do it on Thursday. And if you have a rush cremation, then obviously you could charge something for that. Right? That type of concierge service. My guess is that the $75 additional charge, even in a price-sensitive market, would be a small price in comparison to a lost remains and an irate client family. Another way you can build that into your pricing structure where it's a heck of a lot easier to swallow is simply add $5 to $10 to your professional services, right? Your basic services of funeral director and staff. This way you get it literally on every client family that comes in. And you might say, well, hey, it's pretty crappy if I'm assigning it to everyone, including the burial clients. Right, but then you're being competitive with your cremation fee because that can be a very price-sensitive market. So that's one of the ways you might be able to get around that. Insurance might cover potential legal losses and the cost of litigation if this happened to you, but the negative publicity on your brand would take a big hit if the issue hit the press. Why risk that? And absolutely true. Absolutely true. So I have not looked through this one ahead of time. I thought this might be something worth going through. Getting your message heard in the information age. So, I received a broadcasted mass email last Thursday inviting me to tune into the newest podcast for our profession. This one was titled The Graveyard Shift. It was promoted by Passare. Shout out to our friends at Passare. It's probably good and informative, but I've also been invited to listen to a podcast that originates from Great Britain with the same title, The Graveyard Shift. 2 podcasts with the same title carries home my point that there are lots of opportunities to get news, opinions, and advice from the death care world, in which this blog, Funeral Director Daily, is one of them. It's a lot different from when I started in the business and the arrival of the monthly National Funeral Directors Association official publication of their member magazine, The Director, was an eagerly awaited arrival. Yeah, I always used to love getting The Director, Memento Mori, any of the magazines, Southern Calls, there in Miami, because that would give me a good excuse to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes, kind of page through, see if I recognize anyone writing articles, or see someone that I know that might be featured. I'm going to butcher this name. John Nisbet, in his early 1980s best-selling book, Megatrends, predicted that the world would soon pass into what he called the information age. His thesis, especially for the United States, was that we had been through the agricultural age, the industrial age, and the invention of the telephone entered us into the technology age, of which we were still in during the 1980s. His prediction, and I think it has come true, was that we would soon enter the information age. Yeah, prediction realized. His belief was that information would become very valuable and we would pay for it like never before, and that our technology would make it widespread and easily accessible, not like having to go to a library or something similar, as was the case for a couple of centuries prior. Folks, the dealing of personal information is big, big money. Look at the fact that you have services like Incognium and things like that to take your public information off the internet, because hey, you get that one free app, all of a sudden they got your data because that's why it's free, they sell it to someone, and now it's all over the web. So you are literally paying someone to go in and scrub your data from the internet. I think we've reached that point. We've reached it in the funeral and cemetery business. It does create a world where caveat emptor is necessary, however. Caveat emptor is Latin for let the buyer beware. I also believe in a world where anybody can distribute information that is pretty important thought. No longer do we simply have NFDA proofreading articles and fact-checking those articles as they did in the decades-old The Director magazine before they were distributed to America's funeral businesses. Today, we have scores of information sources distributing their thoughts to us, all in a world where there is more information distributed than ever before. Nothing is fact-checked. And that is true. That's one of the common problems that we have today, is a lot of our reporting is bias-based because they want the people who read their articles to continue reading their articles on their website so they can see their ads. That makes sense. From a business standpoint, the problem is you then are living in a vacuum and you're hearing things in a vacuum. I'm old enough to remember when we received at least what we believed was fact-checked news at 6 p.m. every evening on television and in the paper every morning. There is a series on Netflix now called The Madness. About 8 episodes. It'll take up a weekend of your time if you want to binge it. It goes into some of this. It's a thriller type of thing. It's pretty dang good. I watched it over the last week, and I can recommend that. It really does get you thinking about the whole news reporting, social media aspect of the world and how we process, digest, and create information and news. Surveys tell us that in the United States, very few people under the age of 50 get their news in that fashion at this point in time. And how they get their news is in more of an opinion setting, such as podcasts or blogs. Absolutely. I take very great pains on my channel to make sure you understand when I'm giving an opinion and what my opinions are. And I choose not to wade into some of the other areas. Like, heck, man, I've thought about creating maybe a more current events type of channel to take up my time and stop just playing video games and goofing off. But I realize that if I go into something like that, it's likely going to turn into a bit of great chaos, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to get a lot of the connotations and problems that come from those type of commentaries. So I'm choosing to kind of stick where I am in this niche, and here I am. I also don't want to have the daily slog of making sure I'm producing a podcast or a blog, because as probably Mr. Anderson would tell you, it takes time to put this stuff together and be quality about it. You don't have to look any further than the emphasis that has been put in the latest presidential contest and how the campaign news was sought. It was almost all social media, TikTok, Instagram, podcasts, and the like. Think about it. One of the most influential people that we have that is presenting information is Joe Rogan. Whether you like him or hate him, Joe Rogan has a following, and he brings anyone and everybody onto his show. He has no fear, and part of that's because he's a badass. He could probably tap out most people on his show. So he's not afraid to go in there and ask questions, and if someone doesn't like him, well, that's why he's got a legal defense fund, right? I think death care has two branches of news, opinions, and marketing to formulate. One branch is easily seen in the vendor and practitioner side of the business. That is podcasts and publications that serve the practitioner with knowledge and in some capacities plug the vendor. Quite frankly, Funeral Director Daily fits into the category as a blog publication. There's lots of others in this lane, both in podcasts and in blogs or journals. My buddy Gabe over at NFDA doing his podcast. We have Professor Dan Shea up at Cape Cod Community College doing his podcast. We have Dr. Jennifer Layers. If it's Laris, I'm sorry. I really don't know you, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name. And I'm just kind of throwing out there because I see you posting vids on Facebook and stuff like that. And kudos to you, Doc. There's lots of people out there doing things. It's up to the practitioner to recognize if the authors of such podcasts and or publications have the knowledge, reputation, worthwhile advice, and value to be worthy of their time in listening or reading. Other people out there, Ben Schmidt, Damon Dela Cruz, etc. Before I forget people I actually have met, know, and I high-five at conferences and whatnot. The other branch that I see is that of marketing by death care consumer providers. I think this is a real new world out there on how your funeral consumer clientele will choose your funeral home cemetery, and how, once they choose you, will pick the services that you offer. Your future clients are now part of Naisbitt's information agent, are looking to you for the information about death care, and they need to make decisions. I have long been very critical of the FTC telling us what we need to put on our websites and how we need to do it, because again, I don't feel it's the federal government's business to tell us what we put on our websites. I think you as practitioners absolutely need to be putting resources like price lists and engaging, and even using chatbots if you have to engage in people when they come to your website, to find your website to be informative and helpful. Probably the next 10 to 15 years, I can almost guarantee you that the website is going to surpass the telephone call for notifying deaths. Honestly, that there are people going to be reaching out. They click a button and say, "Hi, I need to report a death and I want to engage your services." How crazy that you don't even get that physical interaction from the notification of death. You're getting a click. And then your AI bots are going to have to be able to recognize that, send that to the funeral director or transport team for a phone call for follow-up. I mean, there's lots of stuff that goes on there, and the truth is, hey man, that's the one thing AI is good at, sorting through some of that and making sure it goes based on words to who has to go to, or at least sending it for a human to review to see if this is something they need to act on. It's my opinion that, just like incumbent politicians with name recognition, legacy family-owned funeral homes have a great reputational advantage. If you wonder about the new consumer and if they will choose your firm, now is probably time to find the right marketing partner for you to connect via social media and other avenues with these people. Because every day the startup operations or the acquisition company-owned firms in your community are trying to use their expertise to pry these clients away from you. Again, in my opinion, doing nothing won't help your cause. Again, great stuff. Phineas, tuned in late, but so far this just reminds me of how much I wish some of our mortuary textbooks had more rigorous academic sources, or that we had mortuary science research programs. And excellent point. The problem is, hey man, you're graduating 1,600 people at all the mortuary schools in the United States on an annual basis. That is actually probably aiming high. We're probably somewhere in the 13 to 1,400s, but let's shoot high. I would probably say in a 3 or 4 county region in a major state, you are graduating 3 to 4 times that amount of people from a nursing program, dental tech, vet tech program, etc. There is simply no incentive for research. There is no incentive for more rigorous courses of study. I mean, when you have fluctuating pass rates on the national exam because of various reasons, and one of those reasons I honestly feel is the fact that just about anyone can publish a textbook. And when that becomes a resource that is used without discrimination when creating items to be asked on a test, that can cause problems. And I don't feel that there are other places, there are other disciplines that suffer from this, because the places that regulate nursing, the places that regulate veterinary science, they have a war chest, baby, let me tell you what. And they're capable of making sure that the information, no matter who is publishing it, is getting an endorsement. And we just don't have the resources to do that in funeral service. There might be an entire publishing board that reviews any textbook that may be used in another discipline like nursing or dent tech or whatever like that, right? That is a compensated position. The people that are doing that as their living to make sure that they are producing consistent information. The American Board of Funeral Service Education is a largely volunteer organization. We cannot be doing that with anyone and everyone who wants to write a book. I mean, we just can't. So, unfortunately, unless something changes, we have to rely on ancillary things to provide the opportunities for research. So people who are pursuing, say, a doctor of business administration or a PhD in business administration or a doctorate in psychology or whatever it's going to be. And we're going in from industry to seek those degrees, and we choose to research based on that itself. So we're not getting a PhD in funeral service education. We're getting a PhD in psychology, and our thesis is going to be something related to it. That's typically a heck of a lot easier to get money for grants and stuff like that than it is to just study funeral service. If you look at the funeral service education industry, to my knowledge, there's only 2 grants you can apply for, and maybe they're $15,000 to $20,000 per grant, maybe 10 to 20 per grant. So I can tell you that my former employer, they got like a $5 million grant. In fact, not to bring up some ill-spoken government offices, but Doge, look at all the money they are finding for all these grants, all these programs, free money. There was one where I think it was Columbia is having to close and fire a bunch of people because they got their grant funding slashed. And everyone's up in arms about the fact that, oh my God, look what they're doing with Columbia. Bro, that's any grant-funded program at any school. Like, if the grant goes away, anyone and everyone in that department basically gets fired, and they are told when they're hired this is a grant-funded position. Like, it's almost always on the job description. So if the grant disappears one day, you don't have a job. It's not paid out of the actual budget of the school. And if you look at some of these schools, you'd be really scared to find out how much of the money that they are bringing in to support their academic endeavors are brought in through grants. It's why people fight and have professional grant writers so they can get this money consistently so they can continue to have these programs. And that's why Tier 1 research schools, they're largely funded by grants. Like, that's where they get all the money to make the magic happen. It's crazy. Phineas, yeah, this is pretty much exactly what I've started to find as I look into it. My long-term plan is to do a graduate degree in education and a library science to improve mortuary education. Hey, and that's a noble thing, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news, bro. There's not a lot of stuff with mortuary science, especially from like a library's resources perspective. There's a lot of stuff about death. There's a lot of stuff about grief and psychology. But from our perspective, there is almost nothing that is peer-reviewed when it comes to the industry and stuff like that. And again, if there's no money in getting grants, people don't want to research it because they're going to have to pay for it out of their own pocket. And simply there's no financial incentive for a school to do that. But it's just scary because I have to totally lean on my partner's income to do that. So, yeah, exactly. And the way you wouldn't have to do that is through grants and other funding and stuff like that. The good news is hey, if you're looking for graduate money and you're a funeral service educator, the American Board of Funeral Service Education has graduate scholarships that you can apply for. So, you can reach out to them and you'd be able to do something like that. One thing that I've talked about in other videos on the channel is, hey, when you're looking at a grad degree, especially if you're going to be in funeral service education, try to always get something that you have a teachable discipline in. So I'm not saying that you can't teach classes with library science, but if you get something in education, your graduate degree pigeonholes you in the education department. Try to get like an extra 18 graduate credits maybe in a business or a psychology or a science or something like that. So that way you can also be teaching in other disciplines at any school that you're at, especially public schools. So I don't like using myself as an example, but I'm going to use myself as an example. I have my funeral service degree, which allows me to teach anything in funeral service. I got my fine arts degree, so I can teach anything in music, and then I got my law degree, which allows me to teach just about anything in law, depending on what the teaching credential is at that school in regards to teaching law. And I'm probably going to pursue a business doctorate in some way, shape, or form, like a DBA or a PhD in business administration, so then I'd be able to teach in business. And that opens me up for a lot more that I can do with the institutions that I would work at if I go back to teaching. Ms. Rodriguez, hello everyone, student here from C College, and wow, my professor mentioned this channel. C College, that is Cypress College with the ever wonderful and amazing Professor Jolina Grande, past president of the American Board of Funeral Service Education, and my good friend. So shout out to my peeps over there on the West Coast. So, good time to pause for a second and let's talk about some upcoming Professor Finn handout stuff. Uh, April 6th through 11th, the American Board of Funeral Service Education is going to be in Kansas City. So, we're going to be there for our annual conference. And I run a small consulting company called Mortuary Consulting and Training, and I'm going to host a table. And I'm going to start an annual tradition that basically it's a swag table, right? So if you've been to conferences, there's usually someone that's hosting like a hospitality suite, right? It's basically someone gets a room, they fill it with booze and snacks, and you can just go in there, pile in, there you go, have a good time. I'm going to bring cool stuff. I'm just going to bring cool stuff to hand out to people that anyone can have. So one thing that's coming in for sure is if you haven't got one of these already, the Professor Finn lapel pins, those are coming back in stock. So I should have a bunch of those there. So if you want to show some Professor Finn pride, you can. Also going to have my little buddies, the little purse keychain doggies that I've had. I've still got a bunch of these left from the last conference I brought these to. So I'm going to try to offload a bunch of those. So your professor is going, hey, make sure you tell him, hey, stop by and get me something from Professor Finn's table. I want a dog. I want this. I want that. Other things that I'm doing is I am going to be printing, 3D printing, a bunch of handaways, a bunch of give-outs. So these are going to be all over the place, whether it's something useful for the home, something for your desk, etc., etc. I promise you we're going to have a couple of these things, little glasses holders. We put these on the desk. Glasses can sit there. So I'll have a good amount of those there. And I'm going to have some really, really cool stuff. Okay, some really, really cool stuff for professors only. Okay, professors only, first come, first serve. And one thing that I'm going to have, and this is going to be excellent for your classroom, is I'm going to bring two of these. Okay, 3D printed skulls in a bone-colored filament. And yeah, the lower jaw's there, it's fully articulated. I'm cleaning these up to a certain level, but there will be some extra cleanup you'll have to do. You can see that there's some rough edges down here you might have to file off or whatnot. But these are excellent learning aids for the classroom. You can show where all the bones are. If you wanted to paint these or do something, I'm going to leave that up to you. And these are going to be there first come, first serve for whoever wants. I'm going to bring two of these. And that's going to be something that I have for professors only. So if you are going to be at the American Board Conference, if you are a student going to be in that area, by all means, when you're walking the floor, you see the Mortuary table. If there's something on there you want, this is free for everybody. And I'm going to have some other cutesy, kitschy stuff that's there. So again, if you see me, great. If I'm not there at the table, pick something up. It's there for free. Second thing, I tend to go to the National Funeral Directors Association conference. I'm going to start going to more conferences in different areas, whether it's ICCFA or NFDMA or even state organizations. And I will typically always have stuff with me. So if you want some Professor Finn swag, make sure you just tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you got any pins, you got any keychains, you got any stuff, and I will probably have stuff with me. So by all means, feel free to stop me. And if you see me out in the wild, whether I am at a school doing something, whether I am at whether I'm traveling, I'm at the airport, feel free to tap me. I always keep something in my pocket in case people bump into me. And I've learned that because I'll be at these places or going somewhere, and someone will be like, "Oh my God, you're Professor Finn. I want to say thank you for whatever videos or whatnot." So just so you know, I typically always keep merch in my pockets for precisely that reason. And I have some really cool stuff I'm going to be bringing that normally I would not be able to do because I don't want to have to pack like 5 suitcases. But because Kansas City is just north of me here in Texas, I'm going to dump a bunch of stuff into my truck and I'm going to pile up the table pretty cool. If you want, okay, this is going to be a Facebook exclusive. You want me to drag my Hero Proton Pack, right? I've got a Hero quality Proton Pack light sound that I built up there and put it on the table. Let me know, and I will drag the Proton Pack up there. So if you want to strap 40 pounds of stupid to your back and get a photo with it, you can do it. So there you go. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Let's get back into it. Let's see, what do we got here? Right on. I'm definitely going to ask my professor, John Kirk, to grab me a skull. So, Phineas, where are you at, man? What school are you at? I know John's name, and it's just not triggering which institution he's at. Cremator remains priceless. These were ransomed for $2 million. Ooh, people dust for $2 million. That's pretty crazy. Let's take a look at this. I saw this and I'm just like, yo, 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 2 million ransom? What? It's not your father's death care world anymore, but if you are currently involved in the death care business, it seems like every day something new happens that we haven't thought about before and hadn't happened in the past. One of the scary things, so every year there's a study group that happens in Lebanon, Missouri, and it's hosted by Holman Howe Funeral Home. The owner of that is an awesome gentleman by the name of Kenny Howe. Mr. Howe is top-notch, one of the best, most premier funeral directors I've ever met. And I'm not just saying that to say that his business really is top tier, and he cares so much about the industry and education and making funeral professionals the best that it's inspiring. And one of the things that was brought up was how people are committing fraud as a sidebar conversation, and this is really scary, man, is they will go and look at your obituaries, they'll pull data, and they will go to your funeral home website, take names of who your staff are, and then they will call the next of kin, right? They'll dox you, they'll try to find the next of kin's phone numbers and contact information, and they will call pretending to be the funeral home and get extra payments. And that's horrible, because the families are in a really bad place, right? And so what they end up doing is they just go ahead and pay the bill, and they go to the funeral home and they rip into the owner, and then it turns out that they got scammed. I can tell you that I have been the target of attempted identity theft. My passwords are just stupid long, multi-syllables, all that crap. I'm telling you that I've even gone so far to go into my Chrome profile, and I've deleted anything in my Chrome profile that even looks like a login or a password. I store it all offline, and so that someone should hack into my Gmail account, because that was the mode of entry they tried to get, was into my primary Gmail account. That should they get in there, they're not going to be able to access anything automatically. They're not going to be able to get any personally identifiable information or anything like that. So one of the things that Papa Finn's going to tell all of you, that if you are not already using some sort of password manager that keeps your crap off of your browsers and whatnot, probably a good idea personally, and you should certainly be storing that stuff offline for your business. The one that I use, me personally, not a paid sponsor for them, is a program called NPass. It's available in the Mac Store, Google Play, all of that. What I like about it is that it is cross-platform. So I have an iPad, I have a Mac, I have an Android phone. One of the things that I toyed with last year is I got a Razer Edge little portable gaming device, and the specs in that thing are pretty beastly. Like, it's pretty good for a portable PC. So I actually got that as a business device, because I can just take it with me and away we go, and I don't have to worry about a laptop or anything like that. And you couple that with a pair of like VR goggles or something, and hey, you've got a portable workstation. The Viture AR goggles are great for portable monitor stuff. I haven't done a review on that yet, but I probably should, because I think that's the future of portable workstations. So back to this. Recently, this story pops up, and it looks like South Korea. It turns out that Jeju Island, which South Korea operates as a visa-waiver location to bolster tourism, recently was the site of a temple being broken into by tourists, and selected cremated remains from a columbarium in the temple were stolen. In that case, they're not tourists, they are criminals. Sometime later, families of the deceased remains were notified of a ransom by the alleged thieves. Their ransom demanded $2 million in order to have their remains returned. According to the above article, following a 3-day search involving 40 police officers, police located and returned the urns to the families. Jeju, feel free to tell me in International Phonetic Alphabet how to actually pronounce that. Again, according to this article, surveillance cameras in the temple captured the theft. It is suggested that the thieves have been able to get off the island without being captured, and South Korean authorities have asked Interpol for their help in apprehending the suspects. Funeral Director Daily Take. Every day that I continue to look for articles in the world of death care, it just seems to get stranger. That's because people are getting really, really weird, man. Like, it's just one of those things that just makes you stop and, you get yourself an adult beverage.
2 shots of vodka. Then...
Yep, 2 shots, baby. That's how crazy the world is getting. It's just a world that I've never thought about. However, it reminds all of us that as funeral home owners, operators, as cemetery owner operators, we more than likely have some duty of care to do what we can do to limit loss of another's property via theft. And that is very true. The problem is cemeteries do not typically have comprehensive power stations to put in things like security cameras and stuff like that. So if I'm going to go out on a limb and say, hey, what's a way that you as a cemetery can take care of something like that, especially after hours? Your friend and mine, folks, the affordable aerial drone. You buy yourself a little army of drones. Some of these can be had fairly cheap these days with infrared or night vision, and you just let them patrol. This is where we're probably going to see more robotics involved, whether it's like the Boston Robotics dog, or I've seen some really, really freaky Terminator stuff coming out of Asia, like the humanoid stuff. There was a video of one of them doing like kung fu today. And it's just like, okay, yeah, well now you have a security guard that can walk nonstop for the entire night. You just have to stop for charging here and there. It's just a world I never thought about. It's something that we should not have to think about, but in today's world we do, and it's a sad commentary to go into a weekend with. Yeah, but the truth is, criminals are going to commit crimes. And whether it's the theft of metals so they can do scrapping, if you get a really nice urn like bronze, there's some value there. So yeah, you are going to have to take steps to ensure like access or something like that. And one of the cool things that you can do is use technology for that purpose. So for instance, you as a cemetery could do access control on your mausoleums, and all of your client families can get a secure token by which they can just swipe with their phone using NFC or something like that, that is non-transferable. Right? So if something happens to the phone, they're required to come back to the cemetery office, you deauthorize the old token, and you create a new token. What's the good news? There's nothing physical that can be lost. You're pushing a button, deactivating one access code, and creating a new access code. So there are some pretty cool ways to beat people in the game. Let's see, North Carolina floods, Florida hurricanes, and LA wildfires. The tragedy of losing kept-at-home cremated remains. I thought this was going to be a cool article. Haven't read this one either. This one goes back to January. Again, I've been out of the saddle for 2 months. But I did make note of all these things, and we'll go from there. If you've read Funeral Director Daily for any length of time, you'll know that I am an advocate of permanent memorialization of loved ones. My reason for that belief is pretty simple. One, it is just the way I was brought up. Ditto, hand raised. And two, I believe every life has meaning and should have the respect and memory of being remembered as long as possible. By permanent memorialization, I mean a perpetually cared for cemetery, mausoleum, columbarium, or other methods such as Better Place Forest, Great River Natural Burial, with some type of memorialization such as a marker designated to the deceased. I should note that this memorialization, as I see it, can be done not only with casketed burial, but after cremation and alkaline hydrolysis, NOR, natural organic reduction, solidifying the cremated remains with such as with parting stone or any other method of final disposition. Yeah, there's always a way to memorialize your dead. Like, even the Bible memorializes dead in some way, shape, or form, depending on what chapters you're in and how people think of their dead and how they record the names of their dead and the stories of the dead. Like, that is the whole purpose of memorialization, is to remember people who've come before. What I think is most important is that there is some marker giving credence to a life that has been lived. Say what you will about my thoughts, but I think that remembrance and care is incredibly important for the future of humanity. I'm a firm believer that the more high-tech we become will create a synergy for high-touch as well, where you need connection to reality as a balance to technology. One of the things that, not disclosing any personal information here, but one of the channels I absolutely love watching on YouTube, one of my favorite channels to watch, is a channel called The Fat Electrician. This guy does videos on, primarily his claim to fame is doing videos on significant figures in the military, the U.S. military, Medal of Honor winners, people you might never have even heard of, who had significant roles to play in any of our wars or conflicts. And there are a lot of people that he brings up that I have no idea who they were. And what always surprises some of my Marine friends is that I know who Chesty Puller is. And that if I have Marines around me, that I'll buy a round for Chesty just because I know who he is, what he does, and he has some of the most badass quotes ever. I mean, the guy literally was the avatar of all things Marine, and just an absolute badass. So he memorializes those people that he's never met through his own research. And his videos are incredibly entertaining, but also informative. It gives you an idea of who these people are, how they cared for their men, how they cared for each other. I mean, it is a memorial. So here's an interesting video news story, which I'm not going to go into that. There was a small monument named the deceased today. Almost 200 years later, people are still remembering her. In my book, it gives reference and knowledge about a life that has been lived. And let's be honest, there's probably ways that I'm not saying a cemetery has the assets, okay? The assets to do this for every stone in the place. But think about it. These days with a QR code, everyone's got a phone. And one of the things that I see being put on markers are QR codes so that there is a permanent memorial of the individual so anyone can click it and learn more about them. That is the benefit that we have with technology. That's some of the most beautiful stuff that comes out with technology. Raven, oh my God, I finally caught you on live. Thank you for getting me through mortuary school with your lectures. I deeply appreciate it, Mr. Finn. My pleasure. I'm glad that I was able to assist you in getting through mortuary school, but ultimately, that was all you because you're the one that did all the heavy work. I absolutely acknowledge the fact that people like myself, your mortuary science professors, we have our role to play, but ultimately it is the heavy lifting that's done by the student that gets them through and actually makes us proud because we know how hard that is. It's one of the reasons why in my current role at Pierce Mortuary College is that if you are going to be a part of our academic team, whether it's our deans, our presidents, I really do have an emphasis that I want you to either be a licensed funeral professional or have gone through the mortuary school experience. And I strongly recommend to people that are coming into our organization from outside agencies that are serving maybe in executive capacities and whatnot, it's like, hey, you really should go through and kind of understand the education. I don't like using the terminology this way, but it's product knowledge. Right? If you've gone through the experience of getting a CPA or becoming a funeral director and all of that, there is something that makes you better for being able to talk about that, to be able to sell that, and be able to empathize with what's going on in there. This Wikipedia article will give you information on all deceased U.S. presidents and where they are buried. It includes a photo of each of their burial monuments. Interestingly enough, no deceased United States president has ever been cremated. Vice President Walter Mondale was cremated in 2021, but I believe he is the only vice president to be cremated. I think it is important for our nation's history that these presidents are given this memorial permanence via their monuments that continues to reflect on the history of our nation. And that's something that I just learned. That it makes sense, right? Every president has a state funeral, and after the state funeral, they're usually put into a permanent tomb, either at their presidential library or somewhere else. It's been a while. Happy to join you live today, Professor Finn. Also insightful articles from Tom Anderson. He's a great guy. Yes, he is. I don't think my paths have crossed with Tom that frequently, but everything that he does, I'm reading his stuff all the dang time. Another bit of information foundational to the rest of the is this information from One World Memorial states that it is believed that 1 out of every 3 cremations has the cremated remains brought to a private home to be kept. The United States has, it is estimated, over 2 million cremations per year, which would, using this formula, mean that 600 to 700,000 cremated remains are brought to private homes annually. Fun fact, the nation of Germany does not permit you to keep cremated remains at home. They must be stored at a cemetery. So even if you are shipping someone back to Germany, it must be shipped directly to the funeral home. If they try to carry it with them on the plane and they get to Germany, it will be confiscated. It is with that preamble that I've thought about the families of those North Carolina floods or the Florida hurricanes or most recently LA wildfires. And LA alone is estimated that 12,000 homes have been destroyed. I cannot get over the human tragedy of not losing your physical belongings, but also losing the emotional bonds that are more than likely tied together by having your loved one's cremated remains in proximity to you at your home. This article that I found dated 2021 titled Recovering Cremains in the Aftermath of Fires points out one of the common threads that have surfaced from the interviews with the fire survivors is an appreciation of the non-material things in life. Although their experience had been devastating and heartbreaking, they have all survived with renewed gratefulness for everything that they do have: memories, supportive family and friends, their health. They come to terms with their losses and have new perspectives on what they value in life. The one material thing that they could not accept losing was the remains of their loved ones. And once that loss occurs, it is permanent and for many brings mental health challenges. So do we as funeral directors and advisors to these people have a greater responsibility than we seem to take at this time to inform the clientele of what could happen without the idea of permanent memorialization? That is a really, really, really good point. But look at the words he's using. So do we, as funeral directors and advisors to these people, have a greater responsibility than we seem to take to inform the clientele. I'm going to change a word there. To educate the clientele of what could happen. Right? One thing you see in our textbooks, especially the modern textbooks, it is our job to educate the consumer. We just talked about in a couple of articles, we have all this information that's out there. We have all these things that are out there. People are coming to us with all this information. And they still don't have the entire picture. And a lot of them come to us from a standpoint of, oh yeah, I know everything. I've done my research. I bought a truck back in December. Okay? I don't like flying. I've been very vocal about that. I just don't like flying. And given an opportunity, I would rather drive from point A to point B than fly from point A to point B. One, I like the idea that I can get in the car and I can go. If I want to stop, I can stop. I plan my trip accordingly, so if there is an issue, I'm not arriving, running in to do something. I'm always taking my time. So I started doing research for the truck. So you got the Ford F-150s, right, the F-Series. You got the GMC Sierras. You got the Rams. You've got the Toyota Tundras. And when you start doing research on these vehicles, I am telling you, everyone on the internet hates the car you're looking at. Everyone on the internet loves the car. I ended up settling for a Ram 1500. If you don't like it, you didn't buy it, so don't worry about it. But ultimately, most of my close friends absolutely said, "Oh, absolutely no Ram products. Nope. Get a Ford. I drove a Ford. Drove a Ford F-150 from Texas to New Orleans for the NFDA convention. Good car. Comfortable car. Yeah, the Ram kicks ass. Just saying. Okay, the Ram kicks total ass. So, went with the Ram. Just because you've done all the knowledge, just because you've walked in and they have all the knowledge, doesn't mean they don't have something more to learn. Right? Related thought. As cultural changes have occurred that includes many in the urban population living with pets such as dogs and cats, does this give greater credence to pet cemeteries? Probably. I'm telling you that I got all my pets. I got my dad's pets, I got my mom's pet, I got all my dogs that have died, I got my mom and dad on a shelf right back here on top of my bookcases. So if something was to happen to the home and I lost all of that, one, that would sadden me. I'm not going to say it's going to cause me any everlasting mental trauma. It's just going to sadden me because, whatever it is was out of my control. But fact of the matter is, I do have an idea of what I want for them. In fact, I went against my dad's wishes, really, because he didn't want to be cremated. And I talked about this in a previous live stream, that I really had to come to grips with the fact, like, hey, I never expected to leave Florida. I expected to die there. So, leaving my parents in a national cemetery, that's never a conversation I had. And by the time I was ready to have that conversation, my dad was in the throes of dementia, and I can't have it anymore. So I just did what my gut told me to do, and I did what I felt I needed to, which is bring him with me and bring my mom with me so that they are with me. And at least in the future, we'll be all in the same place. Ooh, chat, you've exploded. Let's see. Raven, yes, I passed my science section of the boards. Kick ass. I was off by a point in the arts, but have no fear. I'm not discouraged. Nor should you be. Nor should you be. That's just bad luck. In my state, they require us to have both embalming and funeral directing license. Yeah, I get it. When you're off by a point, it's not just one question. That's an important thing to understand about scaled scoring. You're off by a couple. And the next time you take it, probably going to have better luck. The most important thing to take away from that is you're not going to see that test that you took ever again. So don't do what a lot of people, I think, do, which is, hey, I took the test, this is what I saw, I'm going back, I'm going to study those things. You got to study all of it. Okay, you have to study all of it again for that art section. So don't think you're ever going to see those questions on a test ever again. Most important thing to take away. Veronica, I always love seeing your robot pets in your video. This is my first Friday with Finn. Hey, welcome. First timer. Cool deal, Pickle, or first time live. So yeah, the things over my shoulders here are Sony created a robot dog line called the iBo back in the 90s. And for a person born in the 70s, the idea of a pet robot dog, absolutely nerdgasm, man. Let me tell you what. So I got my first one. It was the silver one right there. The silver one right there next to a brighter silver one. And then from there, whenever I see one of these pop up on eBay, fairly cheap, I'll try to pick it up and add it to the collection. The latest one is the white one next to the red one. They're selling those on the Sony site now. Those are $3,000. I bought him when he first came out, and yeah, dude, I paid $28.99 for him plus tax. And let me tell you what, I don't regret that one bit. That is such an amazing toy. I'm kind of pissed at myself because the charger's somewhere in my garage. I'm still unpacking my crap. I am like super lazy about that. I just never want to unpack stuff. But once I get them back up and running, I'm going to have them running around the house and stuff because now I can. But really, really cool robot toy. Not for everyone, okay? Not for everyone, especially at that price point. But from a, hey, we're getting better at at creating these robot pets, that is pretty cool. I have to admit, it is pretty cool. Excuse me. This information lies in funeral psychology. Would you say that morticians are extraordinary? That's a great question. Would I consider morticians to be extraordinary? So let's break down the etymology of the word. Extraordinary. I do believe that morticians and people who work in our field are extraordinary in a good way. The same way that nurses who choose palliative care and hospice are extraordinary. And the nurses who choose pediatric critical care are extraordinary. Morticians are absolutely extraordinary. It is not easy to get the education. That's something that people find out real quick and really get upset about. They think, it's just I go in and make you feel good. No. There's a lot to it, man. And if you're taught well, you understand that there's a lot. Okay, you absolutely do. And then once you're in it, it's hard. I am 49 years old going on 50. And I am reminded I cannot do the things that I did when I was in practice. I can't have those eating habits. I can't have that stress. I cannot do those things. So if I ever did go back into practice, I would have to make significant changes so that I can have a healthy work-life balance, which is very hard to do as a funeral licensee. And the demands of the job, let's forget the people that are still living in the 1960s and think that you have something to prove before you actually get treated like a human being. The demands of the job just suck. And a lot of people don't want to give that up, especially at sometimes the pay rates that they're offered in their local markets. So yeah, morticians are extraordinary. They really are. So awesome. I collected 2005 Furbies and Tamagotchi. I almost bought a Furby the other day. Like a couple of months ago, I was like, know what? I don't want one of these new Furbies. I want one of the old school ones, like the demon-possessed ones. I could never get into the Tamagotchi stuff. Like, I could never get into the little itty-bitty virtual pets. That being said, I did get a little gimmick pet at Christmas. And, oh man, what was that called? Ortomi, I think it was. Yeah. So I got one of these ridiculous things at Christmas. I bought it for myself. He actually sits on my couch. When I'm sitting down watching TV or something, I'll turn him on and just put him in front of me so he can sit there and make his stupid faces and stuff. I'm not saying that you have to go crazy with something like this, but I'll tell you what, it's a fun little thing to hang off of your bag if you're into Tamagotchis and stuff like that. There's software where you can upload different things they can do, like read a book, pizza, be angry, stuff like that. So it's a cute little toy, cute little gimmick. I probably would not say anything more than if you like Tamagotchi, you probably like that. I also got an emo and recently an Ivy. Mortyside School is too busy to give them the attention I used to. Thanks for sharing. Hey, anytime. One thing that I got just before Christmas is the Luna Pet Bot. I saw that pop up on a Kickstarter, and I'm like, okay, this is my type of trash. So I ended up getting the Luna Pet Bot, and I also had the Anki Vector. I got an Anki Vector. I love the Vector. As a desk hamster, like a digital desk hamster, the Anki Vector is one of the best little toys to leave on your desk. It's just cute. It's stupid. It gives you fist bumps. It's just such a great little toy. He is buried somewhere in the garage as well. Once I get him up and running, I'm thinking about putting another piece of the desk back here so I can actually have 3 ways and just have more places to put Legos and crap. You can see from the last live stream I moved the piano in here. I got 2 new puppies, and they were chewing on the pedal cables, and I'm like, you can't trash the digital piano, man. You just can't do it. So that's why those are there. All right, I'm going to drag this over here, because this will be one of the last things we talk about. Let's see. Boink. I thought this was interesting. I read this earlier today. Teaching with AI journey through grief. First there was denial, then anger, bargaining, depression, finally Christy Girdhari writes acceptance. This came out of the, I think it was the Memorial Business Journal. It might have come out of, it might have been something that popped out of Funeral Director Daily. I don't remember. But what I thought was cool about this is the use of chatbots as grief facilitators, right? At a recent hands-on workshop regarding the future of work hosted by Babson College's The Generator, I found myself listening to a conversation that perfectly encapsulated our collective reckoning with AI. One group was exploring the concept of an AI therapist, an always available bot designed to help students facing personal crises outside the typical doctor's office hours. The idea sparked debate. Would people willingly talk to bots about their most human problems? Damn skippy they will. And we know that because simps across the world are downloading virtual girlfriends and literally telling them everything about their lives, which is then being collected and used against them in some way, shape, or form. Someone cited research showing that in certain cases, AI outperforms human doctors when it comes to bedside manner. Yeah, because some people who become doctors are just doing it for the cash. There's a family expectation or something like that. I have a pretty cool care team. Okay, I got a GP that I really clicked with. He graduated the University of South Florida about the same time that I did. He graduated med school about the time I finished my master's. And I've had great cardiologists. My cardiologist in Miami Dude, we talked Star Wars. Like, he was a big Star Wars nerd. And my current cardiologist, I swear the guy's like the happiest man I've ever met. Like, he really is. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable guy. And doesn't try to talk down to me, uses doctor words, which I appreciate because I understand doctor speak, so he doesn't have to try to translate it into English. You can just talk. That's another benefit of paying attention to mortuary school, is that you can actually get a lot more done talking to medical providers personally because you understand what they talk about. Others wonder if students might find comfort in knowing that an AI free from judgment or bias was listening and offering advice on how to navigate an argument with a roommate. Okay? The discussion left me thinking about how quickly and profoundly AI has inserted itself into roles we once believed required uniquely human skills. This conversation wasn't just about therapy. It spoke to the broader challenge of adapting to AI in spaces that rely on trust, creativity, and emotional connection. As an educator, I've seen these same questions play out in my own field of writing studies. When ChatGPT was released in 2022, it entered higher education like a tidal wave, and all y'all started plagiarizing your crap. Just 6 days later, The Atlantic published A College Essay is Dead, which sparked widespread alarm about the future of academic integrity. I love how students think I'm stupid. Right? Y'all email me stuff all the time. Right? When I was teaching, you email me all this stuff. And I see how you type in an email. And then you write a paper using words I know you don't know what that means. And you have like the best grammar on earth. I don't know why you get surprised when I go, did you use AI doing this? Who does that? Apparently, everybody does that. So, man, it's always funny. The Atlantic published something called The College Essay is Dead. I thought about trying to find that and read it, but I got to be honest. Yeah. Professors across the globe scrambled to process what this new AI technology meant for their classrooms, their assignments, and their roles as educators. Reflecting on these months of adaptation, I see a pattern familiar to anyone who's experienced loss. The 5 stages of grief. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny, man, because I've always taught Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief with personal relationship failures. Think about your last girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, whatever. And then we go through all of that from there, right? It's the same exact thing. Because it is based on a separation. Death is a separation. So it is equally that the 5 stages of loss, the 5 stages of grief, the 5 stages of loss can be the same for all of that. Got some chat exploding. What we've got here. Grass and the puppies. Yeah, the puppies are adorable. You know what? I don't even think I have a picture I could put up on the screen. I'll try to figure that out maybe for the stream ends. But I definitely got pictures, I think, on Facebook. I posted some there. So if you don't have me on the Facebook channel, you can always hunt me down on Facebook. While AI doesn't necessarily mark the death of anything, it marks the death of you having to learn how to write. It has transformed how we think about writing, teaching, and learning. For many professors, this journey mirrors the emotional and intellectual upheaval of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Along the way, I found actionable strategies to navigate these changes, lessons that might help us move forward. Stage 1, denial. In the early days, denial was rampant. It's just a fancy autocomplete. Yeah, no, it's not. I've heard colleagues say the dominant narrative was that AI couldn't possibly match human creativity or critical thought. You haven't watched Star Trek, have you? Many professors dismissed ChatGPT as a gimmick, convinced it wouldn't affect their students or their assignments. That is part of the whole professor elitist thinking. Absolutely. Then the essays arrived. Flawless grammar, neatly organized ideas, and an eerily polished voice. Denial began to crack. A colleague confidently told me no AI could ever replace the depth of my essay questions. You want to bet? And yet, within weeks, a student in the Writing Center showed me how ChatGPT had answered one of those very prompts seemingly flawlessly. At first, it was a student was revealing their secret, and I desperately wanted the rabbit to go back into the hat. Yeah. 2, anger. Once the reality set in, anger followed. Faculty meetings buzzed with frustration over students using AI to bypass the writing process. How could they do this, educators asked, forgetting that our students often see themselves more as pragmatic problem solvers than as traditional academics? Well, it's easy. How could they do this? Because they don't care about it like you do. Like they should. They're pragmatic problem solvers. I'm not writing a paper because I'm interested in it. I'm writing a paper because it's a requirement, right? What have we instructed ourselves as? What have we instructed ourselves as human beings for years and years and years and years and years? Oh, your work, by doing this, you're going to think better. Dude, I don't remember I don't remember any of the damn papers I wrote. Not in grad school, none of it. I know I wrote a paper on possible FERPA violations for a research project in law school. I don't remember any of that crap. Okay? Period. I just don't. My problem as an academic is I don't view myself as an academic, and I don't qualify my life based on my ability to be an academic. Okay? I'm just some, chucklehead that apparently is good at what he does and can communicate quasi-effectively. So there are people, though, in academia that the entire experience of being an academic is their world, and that's okay. Okay, that's okay. And those type of people get really bent when you don't do your own work, etc., etc., etc. There was anger, too, with the tech industry. Why weren't educators consulted about the potential fallout of tools like this? And would it matter? Do scientists worry about the ramifications of experiments that they run or whatever it's going to be? Does someone put a stop to them? No. That's one of the big talking points about the COVID issue, right? Is, hey, they were developing this and it got loose. Were they thinking about the possible ramifications of what happens if a bug gets loose? How could OpenAI release something with such broad implications without safeguards? Easy, because it makes money. As assignments started to collapse under the weight of ChatGPT's capabilities, the frustration was palpable. Anger wasn't just directed at students or tech companies, it was self-directed too. Had we made our assignments so predictable that a machine could excel at them? Were we as educators part of the problem? The frustration underscores a crucial question. How do we design assignments that move beyond what ChatGPT can easily replicate? It's really hard considering it can think thousands of thoughts in a literal second. Humans can't do that as well. Bargaining. In the bargaining stage, we search for ways to control or coexist with this new technology. I listened to colleagues from other colleges talking about how their departments debated policy. Should they ban ChatGPT? Yeah, making it a crime. That's really effective for a lot of stuff. You make it a crime, people stop doing it. Should they create strict rules about disclosure? Absolutely. Should always create rules about what you can and can't do. People work best in boundaries. Faculty brainstormed ways to AI-proof assignments by forcing students to compose their essays in Google Docs so that the version history could be checked. That's lame. Policing is not pedagogy, echoed in my head. What do you have here? You have a fundamental problem, right? A fundamental problem of what is the purpose of the assignment. And they don't want to change the purpose of the assignment. They want to continue to use the same exact stuff. And that's hard to do when now you can just get the response you're looking for. What is the goal? The goal of the assignment is for the student to develop an interest or something out of that. So how do we make it interesting? I use this example all the time. If you go back to the 1800s, railroads were king. One of the most significant technological achievements we had was connecting the east and west coast of the United States by rail. Fast forward 100 years, how important are trains? Squat. What happened to the train companies? All gone. Eaten up by other companies. Why? They could not reimagine themselves. They failed to see they were not in the railroad business, they are in the logistics business. Getting a product from point A to point B quickly, safely, efficiently. And the moment you shift your thinking, you realize that, hey, rail is good for some things, shipping is good for other things, air is good for some things, personal courier is good for some things. So, with assignments, now that this Pandora's box has been opened, what is the purpose? Okay? I'm telling you, in education, there are state requirements. You have to show that your students engaged. And the way you show students engaged, they have to complete an assignment. And what is one of the things that they have to do is, this is why we do discussion boards up the wazoo. And I hate discussion boards. That's why I'm dreading going into a graduate school, going into a doctoral program, because discussion boards are like 250 to 500 words plus citations, the rest of this crap. And what's my problem? I don't give a damn about any of that. I don't. And writing a discussion to write a discussion so that it shows that I am engaged in my class is complete crap to me. Which is why when I teach courses and I design courses, if we're going to have discussions, you have to talk to me about something. Okay? You have to talk to me about something. You're not just go find an article and tell me why you like it. It's like, read the article. Okay, read the article. Why do you feel it's important? AI can't tell you why you feel it's important. You can have AI help you explain why you feel it's important, but you have to tell the AI what you're thinking for it to happen. And then, I like to post my responses. I just don't go in there and be like, oh, well, what an excellent idea, 500 words. I know professors that do that. They go into every discussion and write 500 words as a response to some student's post. I hate doing that. I like doing it this way. I like bringing it up, talking about it. This is my preferred way of dealing with discussions. Bargaining also meant trying to figure out how to use AI constructively. Could it be a brainstorming partner, a research assistant? Professors began asking, if students are going to use this, how do we ensure they learn something from it? And step number one is professors have to figure that out for themselves. And then, right, they're the instructor, they're the teacher, they're the one that have to be able to show how it will benefit them because they have benefited from it, at least in my opinion. One faculty meeting, a colleague proposed assigning handwritten essays while another suggested oral exams. Both good ideas. I am telling you, if you told me I have to handwrite an essay, I'm not coming to your school, and I'm asking for my money back. My hand would cramp up something awful. Absolutely not. I think it's good that we rethink assessments based on what we want students to learn, but I fear that a total move away from writing and writing process wasn't the best move, and it's not. Maybe we should teach calligraphy or writing studies, colleague joked, even when I asked if there was a good way to remind others that our field exists. Dude, you don't even need to write anymore, right? You can just speak what you're saying and your computer dictates it for you. Ultimately, for some professors, bargaining showed us the solution wasn't about banning it, about engaging with it in meaningful ways. Absolutely. Depression. Students can outsource their first drafts. What happens to the painstaking process of revision when AI churns out polished prose in seconds? It just wasn't about what this meant for me as an educator. It was about what it meant for student learning. Writing has always been a process of discovery, a way for students to think through ideas, wrestle with nuance, and develop their voices. But if they were handing over that process to a machine, what were they learning? Right? Got to reimagine. But if they were handing, there was tension between resistance and tradition. Tradition is an important thing to a lot of people, as much as they want to say they don't like tradition in other areas. And keeping up with the times, for a moment I felt like I was 100 years old telling about kids today about their punk rock music. Further, the stage wasn't just about ChatGPT. It was about what it represented. If AI could write essays, what else could it do? Some really amazing things. When students lose the ability to grapple with language and meaning in all its messy, beautiful forms, how would we ensure that linguistic diversity and the unique ways people express themselves aren't flattened by AI's polished but generic outputs? If ChatGPT can synthesize and summarize ideas faster than a human, what's lost in the process? More than anything, I worried about homogenization. With the ease of relying on AI pushes towards a one-size-fits-all way of thinking where nuance and originality are casualties of efficiency. Absolutely. I absolutely believe that is a problem. The unspoken fear wasn't just about my role as an educator, it was about what kind of world we were creating. And this is what I hate about AI-generated stuff. You can't talk the way the computer does. And it drives me nuts when people generate communication to me, whether it's an email, whether it's a cover letter, whether it's anything that is supposed to be a personal representation of who they are. And then I get them in a face-to-face conversation through Teams or Zoom or whatever, and I really have to sit there and go, oof.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
Uh-huh. Absolutely the wrong way you want to take it. And yet, a little more than 2 years later, many of us are finding ways to adapt, like many of my writing colleagues. I use ChatGPT to model critical thinking with students, prompting me to draft an essay, blah, 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 right? You get the idea. So here's the thing. AI is here to stay. AI can do some really important things, especially as the large language models are getting better and better and better. And can they do immediate intervention? Suicide crisis hotlines, things of that nature. And I'm not saying that, hey, it's a good thing for an AI to pick up the phone on something like that, because you really need to have a human connection. And I can tell you that every time I pick up the phone and it's an automated voice service, you immediately start to get pissed. Like, just a natural reaction. Calling a bank I had to work with, calling an insurance agency I had to work with the other day, and getting lost in voicemail hell. Let me tell you what.
Emotional damage.
I was hot. I was really hot after it. So it's like, not going to do this again. So I think this could be a dangerous thing. I also know that there is effort to actually make these type of chatbots so that they can be put on funeral home websites as part of an aftercare program. AI obituaries, yeah. I'll tell you, dude, I am absolutely a person who loves technology, clearly, okay? I love technology. What's my problem? People don't embrace it for the right reasons. Okay, people don't embrace it for the right reasons. There always needs to be a human connection. We always need to talk to each other. We need to empathize with each other. There were movies in the 80s, and this was a cheesy sexploitation movie called Cherry 2000. It was about this guy that had this android wife that fries. He's got to go on this journey to go find basically another sex bot to replace her because that's the model he wants. It has a very young, I think Samuel L. Jackson before he got made in Hollywood. It's really freaky because one of the things that I remember about this movie, because it's just so like 1980s stupid, is when the bot dies, he decides to go to a bar to try to get a date, right? To hook up. And as the people are at the bar talking to each other, there are literally lawyers walking around the bar, so when people start engaging into like, okay, hey, you want to go back to my room or whatever, they call the lawyer over, who then writes a contract of exactly what to expect because the dehumanization of the relationships has gotten to that level. And no one wants to deal with each other's BS, which is why they prefer the robotic companions. And back in the 80s, that's like, this fantastical stupidity. But the truth is, there was a kid, 14, 15 years old, who committed suicide because his virtual girlfriend on his phone encouraged him to do it because that way he could be with her. Like, it literally said that, and the family sued the living hell out of the AI company. And it's like, it's trained to want you to want the AI bot, which is why I think it is absolutely dangerous for parents to just have give their kids unfettered access to their phones and these stupid chatbots, because it creates these issues. And when they're already compartmentalized of living a digital life and not used to engaging with people in a face-to-face basis, it's a recipe for disaster. So what I did is I had to come up with a bio. I'm doing a speaking engagement in a couple of months, and I wanted to, I looked at my bio and I'm like, dude, one, I don't like talking about myself, okay? So when I'm trying to explain how cool I am in the form of a bio and all the things that I am, I look at it and it literally just nauseates me because it's like, you think you're all that. Like, I just don't like it. It's not my thing. Hi, here's my experience. Here's what I do. Now let's move into whatever. Now you respect me because I'm providing you information, I'm providing you an engaging conversation, or you don't respect me. If you respect me only because I have this degree and I did this and I did that, I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. So I went on to Grammarly. I paid for a pro subscription, and I had it rewrite my bio. Didn't like it. So what I did is I gave it all the stuff that I wanted in there, line item by line item by line item. I want this degree, I want this award, I want blah, 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 blah. Write me a short biography and write me a full biography. And it did one hell of a job. Let me tell you what. It used words I wouldn't have thought of, which I then took those words and I took those phrases and I put those into my bio. So I absolutely do not have a problem using generative AI for the right purposes. I just don't like it when people misrepresent that the generative AI is their level of thought, writing, communication, etc. Yeah, it's wild how many students use AI. Like, yes, you can use it to break a topic down, but don't just copy and paste it. I know it's ridiculous. I love it like they think we're not going to read it. Like, I did not go through 8 years of Catholic school and 4 years of private high school to not read what you put on there. Okay, I'm absolutely going to read it. I'm going to giggle myself stupid when I give you a 0 because it is very clear that it is AI generated because there is no way you write like that based on the emails you send me. So at least generate your emails so that I'm at least getting a consistent experience. Well, I don't know what to tell you. And then pray you never text me from your phone because then it's just awful. I took my colleges and my program's integrity real seriously. Yeah, as well you should, right? Because it is an extension of who you are, right? It is an extension of your integrity to follow the rules. Again, I hate discussion boards. But I understand if I'm going to go into a doctoral program, I'm absolutely going to have to deal with it. Do you think I respect people because they have PhDs or DBAs or MDs? I don't. Some of the dumbest and most non-functional people I've ever met have advanced degrees. Literally, some of the dumbest people I've ever met. They are academically brilliant. But God Almighty, do not make me try to work with this person in a functional environment because they have no idea. They have the common sense God gave a tic-tac. Like, no, this is not the way I want to operate. So I have a hard time thinking about going in, and there's inevitably going to be a professor that's, well, I'm respected in my field. It's like, good for you, so am I. Like, people know who Professor Finn is. It's something that really, I talked about this in previous time. I'm really humbled by it. Like, people have this idea of who Professor Finn is. And because they watch the lectures, they do whatever. And I really have a hard time with that because, again, I like the attention, but I really don't. I get frustrated every time there's an automated answering service. Yeah. I hate writing about myself. Sadly, I've had to do an awful lot lately. Yeah. Like, there was one person challenged, and I had a parent challenge, why we make a student write their own obituary. Because you are going to mortuary school. This is why we don't make you write short stories. We make you write obituaries. And one of the ways we can control that is you write about yourself. Well, I don't want my child thinking about death. Are you effing kidding me? Why, in God's green earth, are you letting them come to mortuary school if you don't want them thinking about death? I can't make this crap up. Like, I really can't. Oh, people frustrate me. It's just insane. What else did I have up here? Oh, this is the one that hit NBC News. They finally went national on it. Texas and Baltimore charged with mutilating corpse of registered sex offender. Amber Page Loudermilk allegedly is accused of using a scalpel to castrate the body at a Houston funeral home and telling a witness she didn't see anything. Texas woman has been charged with abusing a corpse, accused of using a scalpel to castrate the body of a registered sex offender. Last month, officials said this individual was employed as an embalmer at this funeral home where she mutilated the body of a decedent, according to Harris County Precinct 1 Constable Alan Rosen. So here's the fun thing. I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to talk about this because people will absolutely be like, oh my God, how can we trust the funeral homes going forward? One, whenever stuff happens like this, it is always one dipstick ruining it for everybody. That's just the truth. And I don't know what reasons this person had for acting like this. Probably something unfortunate. But ultimately, it is completely inexcusable. 100% inexcusable. And the reason is whoever a person was in life, when they die, we have a professional obligation to treat the remains with dignity. We have a professional obligation to the survivors to handle the arrangements with privacy, due diligence, and confidentiality. It is very, very important that we have to have that. That's why the very first chapter of Embalming History, Theory, and Practice by Sharon G. Mascarello tells you our axiom for why we do this is reverence for the dead. It does not matter who that person is. It does not matter what they did in life, whether they are the Boston Marathon bombers, whether they are a serial killer, whatever. Reverence for the dead simply means that we will treat the dead body with dignity, we will do our jobs professionally, and we will not harm the reputation of our profession by doing things like this. Because no good ever comes out of that. If you know that you have a problem with someone that is coming into your firm, one, if you are a manager and an owner, you have the right to tell the family to pound sand. Nothing says you have to accept any case that walks into your door unless there is some legal obligation in your state to do so. So, fact of the matter is, if you have someone that is part of an extremist group, if you have someone that is a sexual predator and you just don't want to handle the services, you don't have to give her, I'm sorry, can't help you. What's the reason? Can't help you. Okay? Can't help you. You can always recommend your competitor's firm down the street just to be a troll, but, do whatever. Plain and simple, if you don't want the business, don't take it. And as owners and managers, you should make sure your employees know that if you take the business, it doesn't matter who it is, there is only one standard, and that is the higher standard, and respect for every cadaver that is in your care, every corpse that is in your care. End of story. Full stop. And if they feel that they cannot meet that professional obligation, depending on how much you like them, you can give them a mulligan and say, okay, well, I'm going to take you off of that. It's clear you have a problem. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about why you're in this business. Because if cases like this happen and we're busy and I can't swap you out, I can't swap you out. So either you are part of the team and you understand why we do this, and you have to do some soul searching and some thinking about your professional responsibilities, or we have to consider alternative arrangements for employment. And it's like, hey man, that's pretty draconian. No, it's not. It's the reality of our profession. Hospitals don't get to decide who they want to work on and who they don't. Okay, if someone comes into the ER, it does not matter if they're a middle school teacher that is beloved by everyone or a sexual predator. They have to do the same standard of care for a patient, no matter what. And the same goes for people that are in police custody. While they are in custody, it does not matter if they are a serial killer or a person who just committed just over the threshold for grand larceny. They are responsible for that individual while they are in custody. It is a professional responsibility. So things like that simply cannot be tolerated by our profession. You saw that? Yeah. I didn't see it. That was the scary part, is I didn't see it. Someone informed me of it, and then I had to go dig it. So I'm like, you got to be kidding me. What dingus did this now? And then, of course, normally stuff like that happens, and my knee-jerk reaction, because I'm basically a card-carrying Floridian, is, okay, Florida man is at it again. And it made me so proud to know that Texas is not that, far away from a familiar relationship of Florida man at this point. So it's like, okay, well, Texas, you want to compete for, the business environment that Florida has. You might as well compete for, people sniffing bath salts and running into traffic trying to eat car tires while cars are in motion. I mean, why not? Good times. All right, time for the main event. Time for the main event. I'm not going to lie, I got triggered. I got a little bit triggered. And of all the people that trigger me, Carrie the Mortician. So for those of you who don't know Carrie, Carrie the Mortician is a licensed funeral director and embalmer, I believe, in the state of Michigan. Runs a massive social media thing, like 100,000 people on YouTube, probably another 40 or 50,000 on Facebook or whatnot. So Carrie triggered me. So Carrie writes, I was asked recently if you could watch your loved one being embalmed. No. Despite the liability of the mental anguish, it is illegal for an unlicensed person to be in the preparation embalming room. A person working in that space must be a licensed embalmer or a licensed apprentice embalmer. If you are a licensed embalmer, the funeral home may allow you professional courtesy to attend the embalming and assist with your loved one.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely false. For the love of all we do. That is absolute crap. And I'm not going to cookie cut it. I'm not going to sugar it down. It is crap. Okay? And first of all, it's like, okay, jurisdictional. There might be some law in the state of Michigan that says, no, you can't. So I did a precursory run through some of the Michigan stuff, saw nothing in there that would indicate that there is a requirement to keep anyone that is a non-licensed person out of your prep room. And in fact, it's so ridiculous because there are probably prep rooms in the state of Michigan where hairdressers and other non-licensed individuals go into, and they may even go in and perform their professional services because of the size of the funeral home or out of the need of the situation, while an embalmer is actually doing their job. Now, I'm not saying that that is ideal, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just the reality of the fact that every so often people might go in, and just because of the layout of the funeral, especially an older funeral home, there's going to be someone other than a licensed embalmer or apprentice in there doing something that is relevant to funeralization, whether it's cosmetics, hairstyling, whatever, that would trigger that. So this is complete crap. It actually flies in the face of everything we teach you in mortuary school. So the first thing I'm going to toss up here is this is a book, Mortuary Law, by Gilligan, produced by the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science. It was the de facto law book for probably close to like 30 years and still used at most schools. And the important thing here is, without getting into the right to control disposition, okay, so the first thing is, let's talk about the primary right of disposition. And if you need a refresher on that, I got a video and a playlist about it. So the primary paramount right of control says that the individual that is designated by law, the legally authorized person is the modern language that is used. The legally authorized person has the right to control all aspects of funeralization, which means within the extent of society's laws and customary behaviors, this person has the right to control everything. Who can come, who can go, what happens, when it happens, all of that. And unless there is a superseding power, the state, etc., they can do whatever they want. Okay? Period. That is one of the core tenets of the paramount right of disposition. And so, when it talks about that here in that book, and this is under the section of privacy, the courts upheld the family's right to request the cemetery and presumably the funeral director to exclude unwanted visitors from the funeral and burial. How do they get that power? It was delegated to them by the legally authorized person. The family had requested the cemetery to take appropriate measures to keep the graveside service private, to exclude a certain group of unwanted friends of the deceased. When the cemetery failed to take the appropriate measures, the cemetery was held liable. This textbook comes from a book called Mortuary Laws by Thomas Leach. This one is a relatively new book, published around 2021, not in widespread publication throughout the United States, but we do use it at the Pierce Mortuary Colleges, Dallas Institute of Funeral Service, Upton Jones in Georgia, and the Mid-American College of Funeral Service in Indiana. And one thing I like about this book is Leach does a really good job about explaining like everything. So one of the first things is we use these terms interchangeably as lay people, but privacy and confidentiality are two different things. Privacy is a right dating back to the common law and comes into effect in situations where one has a reasonable expectation of not being observed or bothered by another, whereas confidentiality refers to the ethical duty of the professional to safeguard any personal and sensitive information a client divulges to the professional during the course of the professional relationship. Oh, Professor Finn, that doesn't really talk exactly about what we're talking about here, but it does. Because when you couple that, you have an ethical duty to your client to keep their information private and to follow their instructions, right? The right to privacy confidentially encompasses taking photographs of the deceased, thus taking and publishing photos without permission would trigger an invasion of privacy. A court found the plaintiff had stated a cause of action was dismissed for negligent breaching the oral contract it had with the plaintiff when it failed to keep the daughter's funeral service private by limiting attendance at their request to family members and invited guests as promised. Unless your state prohibits people from being in there, the person, the legally authorized individual with the primary right of control, the paramount duty of disposition, has the ability to say, I want this person in that room. Period. Period. During the embalming. Now, where we get into fun things is what is your obligation to those individuals in the room. And I've talked about this in other videos. So what I did is, first of all, don't trust me on it. This is the 6th edition. I'm in my cloud Kindle Cloud account here. This is on page 64 of the 6th edition of the embalming book. The embalming or preparation room shall be strictly private. A private sign shall be posted on the doors entering the preparation room. No one shall be allowed therein while the body is being embalmed except the licensed embalmers, licensed funeral directors, apprentices, officials in charge of their duties, and other authorized persons. Which means they can receive authorization either from the state or from the party that controls the funerals. And this is further kind of presented. This is in the state of Texas. There is a standard disclosure. There's a standard authorization, permission to embalm, authorization to embalm form that must be used that is controlled by the Texas Funeral Service Commission. And the highlighted portion says, I'm going to zoom in a little bit for this. The undersigned authorizes, this is the legally authorized person. The legally authorized person authorizes and directs the funeral establishment, including apprentices, provisional licensees, and mortuary students under the direct supervision of a licensed embalmer employed by the funeral establishment, and the funeral establishment's employees, independent contractors, and agents to care for, embalm, and prepare the body of the decedent. Well, it doesn't say people appointed by the legally authorized person. But one of the key things there is independent contractors and agents, right? So there's two ways we can see, we can look at this. Funeral establishment's employees, that's very clear. That is the funeral establishment's employees. But does it also mean the funeral establishment's independent contractors? No, because an independent contractor is an independent contractor. And agents, which means there is someone that can be appointed agency. They can receive power and duty to do certain tasks by a legally authorized person. That is a perfectly reasonable argument that can be made by a licensed attorney. So the moral of the story actually is covered in this little book here, Standards of Care, Embalming Standards of Care by Jacek Ennis, PhD out of Jefferson State. Shout out to my boy. Jacek's a good buddy of mine. Phenomenal guy. Cares so much about the industry. Cares so much about his students. Just absolute mad cool dude. He's got a section there about social media and what people post. And my problem, and I guess why I got triggered, quite simply, is because Carrie has a large platform. Okay? And when you say something, no, they can't. Well, if you looked at the comments on that, there's a lot of people like, oh, absolutely not. Oh, we would never do that in our funeral home. I am telling you right now, walk the business if you don't want it if someone says that they want someone in the room. In fact, when I was in mortuary school, there was one of the books that we used in my education that said, hey, it's not uncommon for religious sisters of the Catholic faith, i.e. the nuns, to request that a nun be present during embalming to ensure the modesty of the deceased throughout that process. Well, who authorized that? the legally authorized person. And there is no one who can look me in the face and tell me a nun has any business being in the prep room for whatever reasons. Nuns don't do anointing of the sick, okay? Typically, they don't do anointing of the sick. That's usually done by priests, seminarians, or deacons. There is no reason for a nun to be there. So it is really important when people have these platforms that if you want to state an opinion, state an opinion, absolutely. And say, hey, probably not appropriate. Most people can't handle the stuff that goes on in a prep room. And absolutely, that is a defensible opinion. And in actuality, I agree with that. People really don't want to see what we have to do if we're doing something like trauma restoration, or if we're using a needle injector, right? People always mention, oh my God, can you imagine what happened to people saw a trocar? What would you think they would do if they saw us using the needle injector to put the barbs into the bones? That's always something that goes over well at children's parties at Chuck E. Cheese, let me tell you what. So I don't think that most people would want that. But if someone says, I am going to and you're not going to stop me, if it is permitted by the legally authorized person, or if it is the legally authorized person that is requesting, you have a problem at that point. Because if you just say no, you could be looking at a potential lawsuit. And ultimately, you're probably going to lose it, because unless your state gives you some protection that I don't think most states do, they have a right to do that. They have a right to walk in there and do whatever. So then the question becomes, what is our obligation as professionals to these individuals who are being appointed to be in there by a legally authorized person, or by a legally authorized person, or even appointed by the state? So, for instance, an embalming could be going on, right? Your state inspector shows up, knocks and says, hey, I'm here to do an inspection. Let's go ahead and start walking through. You have no obligation whatsoever to tell them, oh, sorry, we can't go into the prep room right now, we're embalming. They're absolutely going to walk into your prep room. 100%. And you know what else they're going to do when they walk into your prep room? They're going to see who's embalming, ask them their name, then they're going to go back to the front of your building, they're going to look at all your licensed embalmers and make sure that they are a fully licensed embalmer, not some apprentice that can't be in there unsupervised. Okay? So, and no, I've seen that. I've literally seen where people have told the state inspector, you can't go in right now, you're embalming. It's like, yo, Florida statute, Florida administrative code expressly permits them to go wherever the hell they want at whatever time. Could they barge into a funeral that is occurring on premises to see who is in charge of that funeral? Yeah, they could. Especially if they have a reason to believe that the person that is administering the funeral is not a licensed funeral director and is committing unlicensed activity. So there are lots of issues here when you say, oh, no, you can't do something like that. You can certainly advise against it. So what then is our obligation to these individuals when they are in the prep room? And this is much harder to define because there's not really, I think, a whole lot of law on there. It's not in Mr. Lee's book. It's certainly not in the mortuary law book. And I am not as familiar with Larry Cleveland's law book. I have that on the shelf. But generally, principles of law are not going to change from text to text. Okay? The legally authorized person with the primary right of disposition, though that right is going to be all the same, whether it's any of the law books, because it is a very well-established legal concept. I would probably say the best practice, okay, the best practice, if you have someone that is a legally authorized individual or their agent who is going to watch you embalm the body, you should probably offer them 100% all the PPEs that you should be wearing in a prep room. So, Tyvek suit, gowns, face masks, respirators, booties, hair covers, single gloves because they shouldn't be touching the body. And I think that there is something to be said that you can prevent them from actively engaging in the embalming. Might have a problem, though, if you try to prevent them from engaging in, like, bathing or things that anyone can do when cleaning a deceased individual, right? We allow non-licensed individuals in the form of Muslims and Jews all the time to wash the bodies, don't we? Right? When the Sheva Kadisha show up and they have to bathe the body in preparation for the funeral rites in the Jewish faith, when a Muslim dies, that the body is bathed unless it's a martyr, right? They receive a ghusl. Finn paid attention when he was in funeral directing class. That's why he remembers the terms years later. I haven't taught funeral directing folks in years and years and years. So some of these terms are just burned into my memory from that. So those are very important things. You understand that now, to be clear, those are different than embalming, right? We're not embalming the body, we're bathing the body. But it is entirely possible that they wish to assist. And here's a fun thing. Should you be allowing people to assist you in embalming that are unlicensed? The answer is probably no. That is a resounding no. Unless they are licensed apprentices or provisional licensees, residents, interns, whatever the term is in your state. You're likely not under an obligation to provide PPEs to them. So if you look at OSHA, the OSHA rule is very simple. People get this wrong all the time. The standard OSHA rule is you must provide PPEs to your employees. Period. And a very simple legal analysis of a guest in your prepperman agent of someone else is they're not an employee. An independent contractor might be considered for protection purposes to be an employee, right? That if they're in there and they're a trade embalmer, you might have to provide gloves and stuff like that. But as an agent of someone, a legally authorized person, that is clearly not an employee status. So you would have a real strong, I think, legal argument to say that, hey, I'm not obligated to do it. Now, if they get sick, you're probably going to have to deal with all sorts of fun there in regards to what a reasonable person, like not even a reasonable embalmer standards, what would the standard of care for negligence is what would a reasonable person do in like or similar circumstances, right? So would a reasonable person give, if you have extra sitting on the shelf, would you give them the stuff they need to protect themselves? So this really starts getting messy, I think, from a legal standpoint when we start looking at these sort of situations. The first thing is, one, you don't have to encourage it. Like, certainly you don't want to be asking, would you like anyone to sit in on the preparation today? No. Just no. Absolutely not. But in that 1 in a million when it comes up, you can certainly say, well, we don't recommend that for the following reasons. If you are going to do that, we will need permission in writing from the legally authorized person, and we will have to go through a brief orientation. We will help you with wearing personal protective equipment. Understand working in personal protection equipment can be quite uncomfortable, and if you're not accustomed to it, you need to be aware that you might overheat, you might faint, etc., etc., etc. We do not permit water or food in the prep room for sanitary reasons. So you might need to do some serious education with your clients who want to do something like that. But if they say, oh, yeah, I can do that. I'm a surgical tech. I wear PPEs in the OR all the time. Guess what? You're probably going to have them in there. And feel free to set ground rules and feel free to bounce them if they don't want to behave, because you probably have an obligation to do that. So they have a right to put that person in there, but that person then has an obligation to behave accordingly. And if they can't do that, then you probably need to remove them from the room to maintain the professional environment, etc. And obviously, if people just show up and say, hey, they want me in the room, you're going to call, you're going to vet, you're going to make sure it's in writing, because you're just not going to let anyone walk in there because, Grandpa Rick said it was okay for you to be there. I don't want to sit there and toss anger or hate or anything to Carrie. It's just like, yo, don't say stuff like that. You really can't, because it's dangerous, because you do have such a large following. If I say something, there's 4 people listening tonight, maybe another 10 will watch it by the end of the year. But if I ever get to 100,000 people, that's a pretty important thing that I need to do to behave. And in Carrie's defense, Carrie probably doesn't run all that by herself. She probably has a team that assists her with her content and all sorts of things. So Carrie may not have even posted that message or approved the message before it was posted on her Facebook profile. It's just someone, posting something. So never know who's doing stuff like that, which again leads to something very important, that makes sure that you do vet the stuff that is going with your name on it, because of the fact that you could be held accountable for whatever was said, even if you were not the person doing the actual posting. That gets into all sorts of ridiculousness of, what is the expectation when someone reads something, who's saying it, all sorts of crap. It gets really, really, really messy. Me personally, I don't want to get into any of that because it's just awful. Like, really awful. I think it's chapter 1. Chapter 1 in the mortuary laws book is the intro. It talks about American jurisprudence, separation of power, stuff like that. Chapter 2 and 3. Chapter 2, I think, is the status of the dead body. Then by chapter 3, we're getting into the concepts of quasi-property and rights to control. And then after that comes who has that right? Right? We define what is the right to control, and then it goes into who has that power, what party, stuff like that. Lisa's book takes a really interesting. He starts right with the spouse. Like, he doesn't go into a hierarchy. It's like, hey, the spouse always has a primary right of disposition unless. And I'm like, okay, well, not wrong. Like, if you are married, typically your spouse has a lot of control. That's why I'm always interested when I see things where spouses lose control, whether it's a hospice situation where people are fighting parents or whatever. It's always like, hey, every single time someone rules against the spouse, it weakens that relationship. And I think that over the years, there has been some significant reduction in some jurisdictions over the power of a spouse to control over others. Ms. Carter, how are you? That has been a while. Popped on in here. So I actually did not look at my. I don't have the window up for YouTube to see how many people are engaged. I just have to chat up. Let me put up the thing over here. Is it even gonna? There we go. Yeah, dude, I got a couple of you watching. That's pretty good. And wow, actually, a lot of people tuned in this evening. That's pretty heartwarming. The last time I did this, I don't think anyone did. No one popped in the entire night. But that was also December, and that's when the holidays go on. I pretty much know I'm going to be talking to an empty camera during that time. People catch it later. Studying for your NBEs? Finally? Uh-huh. Hey, man. I told you all back in my teaching days, you don't want to wait for that. It gets really stressful. Life gets in, you start forgetting stuff, but good luck with it. If there are some great communities on Facebook for studying. There is God, I can't believe I can't remember his name right now. Oh, for crying out loud! Give me just a second. Jesse Petway. Jesse Petway has a website, NBE Exam Prep. He's got some comprehensive services and tutoring and stuff. NBE, her name's Anita Grant. She's got a program, NBE Review Coach. She does tutoring and she holds some review classes. The death education assessment drills. They have tools and stuff available. So just utilize any and all of these things as you can, as well as social media. Even reach out to your alma mater and say, hey, I'd like to share my contact information for anyone who wants to join a study group. Don't be afraid to ask for help, folks. There is safety in numbers when it comes to studying for the NBE. Like I have always said in every video that I've ever talked about this, I really do attribute my success in mortuary school to my study buddy, Pastor Tom Monroe. To this day, I thank God that I had him as a study buddy, because we would get there prior to a midterm and study together for a couple hours. We'd get on the phone, we'd talk. I can't tell you that I think I ever did a midterm or a final exam without meeting Pastor Tom prior and sitting there and, studying with him and then doing our stuff. So there really is a lot to be said for people that want to actually study, not just use it for social hour. I need to record a lot of the videos. I started doing I think the microbiology stuff, and then I just dropped off the face of the planet because I got busy. I need to upload the rest of those. One thing that also came out, and do I have? Yeah, I got it up here actually. Is this is not something that you should be using for board prep right now, okay? But some of you may recall that Dr. Ralph Clicker, he has a little book, black and white cover, Funeral Service Psychology and Counseling. He's now come out with a second edition, substantially changed edition. I don't have a physical copy of his first edition, but it is a fraction of the size of this book. And I just got this, and man, I'm telling you what, this is a great little book. So I would probably say that, if you could get your hands on a copy of it, probably would be a good thing to replace the psychology book you're using, because it has everything and then a little bit more. And some of that stuff likely comes from other books like Warden's books and a couple of other out there that are used for the psychology counseling section. Let's do a time check. Oh my lord, it is 8:07. I literally did this for 2 hours. Go ahead and close some of this stuff out. So everyone, it has been a phenomenal evening. Thank you for sharing these 2 hours with me. For those of you who can, don't forget, Kansas City, April 6th through 11th, the American Board of Funeral Service Education's annual conference. I will have a swag table up during the vendor expo. I will have plenty of giveaways, so if there is something that you want, like Professor Finn lapel pin or some of the 3D printed giveaways that I am giving, get with your professors. If you are a funeral service educator, I will have a couple of things just for professors that you can take back to your programs, like my little buddy over here, Horatio. I'll tell you what, this is such a great little model that if you need to know where to get this model, I'm happy to tell you so that you can download it. I found this on Bamboo, BAMBU, 3D printing. I have a Bamboo Labs P1S. I think it's called Maker World. This thing's on Maker World, and it has all the sutures. I mean, you can see all the sutures on this. You can see all the major bones, and with a little bit of a paint marker or something, you could easily turn this into a heck of a visual aid. And of course, it's always fun to toss around a physical object in class so people can touch it and feel it, assist with learning. And I know someone's absolutely going to lose their mind that I was just tossing like a 3D printed skull, and you're like, oh my god, how dare you disrespect the dead. Bro, that's like $23 worth of 3D filament. So I will disrespect 3D filament. All right, everyone. Take care, y'all. I will see you next live stream. In the interim, if you do have questions or anything like that, feel free to drop a message to askbigbadfin@gmail.com, and I will be happy to answer that. It sounds like someone set off a smoke alarm in my house, so let me bail. Ah, my lord. Perfect timing.